All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'll continue to admit people as they come in. Thank you for being with us on this Saturday for this workshop on budgeting and maintenance for collective housing. My name is Sarah Scruggs with the Northern California Land Trust, and we'd like to start this morning with a land acknowledgement, and I'll pass it off to Ari Perediez from the Bay Area Community Land Trust to do that with us.
Hello everyone, how's it going? It's nice to see y'all here today. Thank you for coming. We're gonna start this workshop up with a land acknowledgement like Sarah said. So I just want to let everyone know that we are on Ohlone land. The Ohlone peoples are still here and they are still working with the land. If you live in Berkeley or Oakland, you're on Huchian land. That is the village that was here. And the Ohlone people here speak the language of Chochenyo. The main organization here that's working to rematriate the land is the Sogorea Land Trust. They're an urban Indigenous women-led land trust that seeks to facilitate the return of Indigenous land to Indigenous people through practices of rematriation, cultural revitalization, and land restoration. They heal and transform the legacies of colonization, genocide, and patriarchy to do the work of our ancestors and future generations are calling us to do. If you want to learn more about them, they have a website. It's a sogorea-landtrust.org, and they have a voluntary land tax. They ask for all settlers to pay, and they define settlers as non-Black and non-Indigenous people who live here on this land. And they have a way that you can assess that yourself. I wanted to do a land acknowledgement personally, and also I think in this work it's really important for us to understand that we are trying to create community land, but the land is stolen due to colonization, the mission system, and the mission systems led to basically the federal United States government not federally recognizing most tribes in California. So many people, Indigenous people in California, like the Ohlone people, are landless and living without federal recognition. So they have to do self-determinated work to be able to create visibility and education and to fight for rematriation. Thank you. And yes, Jenny, protect, repair, invest, and transform. That's very important. Thank you for that comment.
Thank you, Ari. And just to let folks know, you may have seen it in the chat already, Ginny doesn't have access to video or voice functions, and so she'll be participating through the chat, and we'll be watching that to make sure that people see their comments. So thank you very much. And wanted to give a little bit more background on the Community Co-Ownership Initiative, the acronym of CCOI. And it's a training series that was started through a partnership between the People of Color Sustainable Housing Network and the Northern California Land Trust. So POCSHN is a resource network for people of color building intentional, healthy, and collective affordable housing communities in the Bay Area and beyond. And the Northern California Land Trust is a community land trust that's in the Bay Area using community ownership and control of land in order to provide affordable homes and community facilities in perpetuity. And the series was specifically put together to expand access to shared ownership and resident controlled housing, provide a supportive space for building relationships, common vision, and resource sharing, and then also centering Black, Indigenous, other people of color, and low-income people-led housing and land projects. You know, we've been using the Zoom platform for this series ever since the pandemic began. and have tried to find more ways to continue to make it feel intimate and a relationship building space. So we look forward to doing that with you all this morning. I do want to let folks know that this is being recorded and we do plan to share it afterwards. So just wanted for folks to keep that in mind. And all the materials from today, the presentation itself, and then spreadsheets that we go through will also be provided to folks afterwards and be available online for you to send to others to use as well.
This is going to be our workshop overview. So me and Sarah are going to be leading the workshop. First, we're just going to do a quick little check-in, followed by kind of like the actual like meat of what we're going to be learning today, which is a capital reserve study and a capital replacement budget. And I will be leading that. And then Sarah's going to be talking about like how those two mechanisms work into a operating budget. And then we're going to open up the floor to discussion and just kind of see like if any questions that weren't answered in the workshop, any clarifying questions, we're happy to create the space and hold that space for y'all to get the answers, or just leads, just thoughts that that you would like to hear today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ari. And since we are a smaller group today, definitely want to open for folks to, if you can, to participate through voice, and you can feel free to participate in the chat as well. But I think it'd be great for folks to introduce themselves, name, preferred pronouns. And then also the first question is, where you're at and why you're here today. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and put us in a gallery view so that we can see one another or see each other's names. Would anybody like to start? I can pass it off to Elizabeth, who's to my right on the screen.
Okay, so check in. I am a member or live at the Addison Court Housing Cooperative that was started in 95, and we closed escrow in December of 96. So we are coming up on, we have 6 more years on this first mortgage, and then we're gonna start our second mortgage. And I actually 6 years ago, or 7 years ago, maybe it was 6, I went to one of the workshops, once upon a time when we were meeting together that faculty, Bay Area Community Land Trust was holding, and Rick Lewis was talking about the CRS. And I thought, oh, now this sounds like something that we want. So I spent 10 hours with him learning, but in 2-hour segments, learning how to set it up and put in all the data and set it up. And then I handed it over to the treasurer. So we have that. And of course, it's pointing out to us through its phenomenal, the website and all the things you find from it, how big our shortfall is, because we are about $100,000 short of what they suggest that we should be in replacement funds. So I just wanted to attend this workshop to see what else I could learn.
Great.
But it is, I must say that it is very, I like that we have the CRS. We have something to refer to. Like when somebody wants a refrigerator that costs $2,000, we can go to the CRS and say, well, in general, we only spend, the co-op is willing to pay us XYZ amount for a refrigerator. But if you want a $2,000 refrigerator, you can have one. And the co-op will pay what the CRS suggests, and then you kick in the rest of the money. So you get the appliance that you want. What happens when that person moves out? We haven't had that issue yet, but I can tell that it might be kind of complicated. But so I think that that's me for a check-in, and leave it up to somebody else.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Anybody else would like to go next?
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name's Bruje Fuego, and I am with amazing, beautiful crew of folks where we are building what's called Espejos Cempasúchil. And currently we're in Mississippi doing some ceremonial sanctuary construction work, but our project, our actual land project is in Puerto Rico. And that's where some of us are from, and other folks in our crew are immigrants coming into the space and honoring the ceremonial spaces there. And the type of work that we're doing is ceremonial agroecological land work. So all from healing, stewarding the land, really building on collective housing, sanctuary retreat space for people of color, queer, trans folk, and white allies to come and be part of this. So that's a little bit about us. The reason why we're joining in this conversation today is I think, you know, like growing up poor and working class, like, you know, you're always on the hustle, we're gig based, you know, the concept of money is always like living day by day. So it's like budget, like what is that? Like the budget is trying to stay alive and survive, you know? So, but thinking about it and how to live abundantly despite like the concepts of money and capitalism and all these, you know, limitations that are placed on us, and saying like we're gonna break out of that, and everything that we need is gonna come, and we're gonna work together and embrace each other and move forward, and it's gonna flow, and we're gonna call on it, and you know, we're gonna do the work with it, and we want to be responsible to each other as a collective, you know, working together, and honoring and respecting each other's work and contributions, and how to also materially like work on a budget. Like, you know, it's like, so I think part of the question was like, what feelings or emotions come? It's like, oh, you know, when you want to just procrastinate on things that you just don't want to deal with, you know, yeah, we've done like spreadsheets or try to attempt, but it sort of gets started and it gets dropped, stuff like that, you know. Or yeah, just figuring out like what are the best ways or categories or tools that will work for us. And I know like we got to figure that on the way, you know, like as we're working together on this. But I think having like even initial templates help to see how other folks have done it, projects, what has helped, what are things that people have learned as an experience, you know, from their own journey that we can already see, so that maybe we don't have to go through that, because we've already, you know, learned it from other folks who've gone through it and can think about it. So yeah, just really, you know, trying to, instead of running away from and being afraid of engaging with the whole issue of how to be in harmony and not afraid of dealing with the money, but how to really like come to peace with it, and instead of it being against us, how are we like actually in less stress by facing it and and just working with it. And so we really want to do that, and not because that's part of how we also want to live. We really want to create a legacy that with us, you know, that we don't have to live in this constant misery that is put on us, especially through colonization and you know, just the hustle that we have, because we've learned a lot from the earth of the abundance that we live within. So learning all the tools that we can is really important for us. And budget is one of those, you know, those tools, those tools that we have to use, and tools are great. We will make of them whatever we need to make of them and mold them as we need to shape them and shape shift them and have them really work for our benefit, not against us. So that's who we are. Thank you all for doing this work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I'll pass it off to Jocelyn.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, my name is Jocelyn, she, they. I am a member of the Fairmont House Co-op, which is a newer co-op in the BACLT. Our house was acquired about a year ago, and it was previously owned, our last landlord owned it since 1987. So when it was acquired, there was lots of deferred maintenance, and we're working on retrofitting it right now. I've been the finance committee facilitator for a while, and we are just reaching our annual budget. And so I thought that this workshop could be helpful in developing next year's budget, as well as more confidently making decisions for maintenance as we start checking things off of our list, getting this house up to code, I guess. So thank you guys. This is very applicable to us right now and coming at a really helpful time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming, Jocelyn. Next is Danny.
Hi there, Danny Brockington, she, her. I live at and am community manager of the Guild in Atlanta, Georgia. And I just realized I don't have my headphones on, so I might be echoey. So let me pop those in real quick. Sorry about that. I joined this workshop today because our setup is a little different. We're not set up as a cooperative yet. We're it's set up more like renting. You're paying a membership fee, and it's including your rent, your utilities, programming, that sort of thing. And we actually lease the building we're in from a developer, a supposedly mission-aligned developer that we partnered with a couple of years ago, but learned over the course of the past 2 years of that partnership that it really kind of the owner of the property that you're working with, their goals kind of cannot mesh with our goals. So we're definitely shifting, and our goal was always to shift to more a cooperative ownership model. And we're in a position right now where we are actually doing that. And we're actually working on a community investment trust model. And so we're looking at like what is going to be the governance and operation of that as we shift into that new project. And I, as the community manager, don't deal with the budget right now, but that is a thing that I am going to begin to do, and especially as we do more things and serve as a model for more projects. So I definitely wanted to get some insight and get some help with that.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks for being here all the way from Atlanta. Yeah, thanks to everyone who is here from other places that aren't the Bay. Wow, I didn't know that this is my first workshop that I'm teaching, so I didn't know things like this could have this reach. Jenny, since you don't have video, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Can everyone see Jenny's? This is Jenny Madsen. I've rented for 52 years in the Bay Area, Pleasanton, SF, Oakland, Union City, Cherryland, and for the last 15 years in San Leandro. My ability to move is less with every passing year. I have lived my life alone, never felt like I could or should own, and never married, so I didn't see it as possible. I can see very clearly now that if I have any kind of secure living situation in my future, it must be part of a group, which is a very unfamiliar concept. I'm officially retired on Social Security, which means that my income is way below the poverty line, and that is not going to change. Trying to figure out how I can do this and still be able to have the space to weave on my loom, which is what I want to do. I have joined a community land trust because I see that as probably the only way I will be able to swing this. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, while this is going to be dealing with like kind of like the nuts and bolts of that, we can definitely help and plug you into like organization, like our organizations and like basically like places like we have a lot of openings and stuff like that, and that's something that we can help you out with too. Thank you.
Definitely. And before we go back to kind of the nuts and bolts that Ari's going to walk us through, I know that Bruje shared some feelings that they have around budgets and talking about money. Some of the things that I wrote down were afraid, wanting to procrastinate, misery, but also a desire to come to peace with that as well. Are there other feelings that people have or thoughts that come to mind when you think about budgets and maintenance that you'd like to share?
This is Danny. Stress. For me, one of my roles, we have actually a property, the owner of the building also serves as the property manager. And so I end up being the liaison between the residents and the property manager, which really means the property manager offloads as many responsibilities to me as possible. And it's just such a fraught role to have to take on. And I feel like in my situation, because I'm not the one who actually has the authority to make things happen and call the people and pay for it, that it just kind of ends up being this like really fraught piecemeal thing. And that's another reason I just how to do all of the pieces in the most efficient and optimal way that actually works for everybody.
Thanks, Danny. And welcome to Sharon. Sharon, we're right now sharing with each other feelings and thoughts that come up when we think about budgets and maintenance.
I still have settings on my computer from my previous Zoom meeting. Forgive me. And I'm hungry and might be focusing on breakfast while I listen to this meeting. My feelings about budgeting depends on who I'm budgeting with mostly.
Thank you, Sharon. Jenny expressed some things too, and it's my experience with maintenance has always been as a tenant, basically trying to get them to do things that need to be done. So stressful and frustrating. I started trying to understand what everything costs and paying for what I could, but it is scary. I got my budget under strict control, but cannot imagine having to do a budget with other people. Yes, a budget with other people. It takes a lot of intention, grounding, emotional work, and to like also coming to like common ground to understand like where everyone's coming from and everyone's different viewpoints, everyone's lived experience around resources and money, everyone's access to capital, and that capital not just being actual cash, but all the different forms of capital that exist in society that people have access to. So yeah, that these are all like things that can happen, but happens with like where this is where like cooperation comes into play, where you're able to like start talking and having those hard conversations, moving through those conversations, having the skills and the facilitation to be able to move through those conversations and come to mutual understandings and conclusions to be able to go through that hurdle to be able to actually get to the budget. A lot of groundwork. Thank you everyone so much for sharing.
And Ginny shared learning how to think cooperatively as well as act cooperatively takes lots of practice. Yes, it does. I think even if you're in it for a while, it still takes continued practice, and you're continuing to learn new things and learn from mistakes and things that are challenging and growing from there. If there's not anybody else that wants to share, we can go ahead and jump into the nuts and bolts. Folks feeling okay with doing that? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Thank you for everyone who shared. I think it's important to get out just where we're at with this subject before we jump into just the practice of things, because our emotions are always tied to this, and our experiences as well. Okay, go ahead, Ari, and thank you.
Thank you. So I know some of you are calling from other places, but we're going to be looking at this as like now that I know like where y'all coming from, a lot of this is based in a California code. It's a section 5550, and it's has to do with like cooperatives, like legitimate cooperatives, like LEHCs and condos. They have to do something legally called a capital reserve study. And that is a maintenance and budgeting assessment practice for cooperative housing. What it essentially is a spreadsheet where a mathematical equation determines how much you need to budget every year to make emergency and scheduled repairs. Like I said, it's a requirement of legally incorporated co-ops and condos. And it's not legally and non-legally incorporated co-ops, kind of like where Danny lives, are here in California, are not legally required to do capital reserve studies. But as we've been talking in this workshop, it's highly recommended to be able to like live cooperatively, understand all those things, and to be able to come to have transparency around money and where the money's going every month and what the money is for.
And it doesn't sound like we have anybody that's from an unincorporated condo, but just in case I missed it, or if you know anybody that is, there actually still is a requirement. You don't have to report on it, but if somebody that's a member of the homeowners association, the condo association, asks for a reserve study, the homeowner association, the condo is supposed to have one, and they're supposed to be looking at it and redoing it every 3 years, and then doing an annual checkup every year, and providing that to the members of the homeowner association 30 days before the end of their fiscal year. So those are some of the requirements. Again, if you're not legally incorporated, the state isn't going to ask for anything, but the members are supposed to have access to that document. And again, like Ari is saying, it's a really important way to keep track of what's needed to take care of your housing, and really important conversations to have around budgeting and money.
The next slide. Yeah, okay. So basically how a capital reserve study starts is you think about how many units does your building have. That's if you live in a multi-unit building, say like an apartment complex. And there will have to be like an assessment done for each unit. If you just live in a house, you'll just have like one whole assessment for your house. Basically, it starts off by like listing off all the components. So you can go room by room. Like let's say your living room, you have windows in your living room, you have light fixtures, electrical. Your kitchen, you have all your appliances, you have your plumbing, you have your lights, electrical, floors, the floors for all the house, just the roof, anything like that. So you basically, that's a whole lot of information to take in at once. So I've kind of just like been like, okay, well, how can we streamline this information? And you basically, if you can do the spreadsheet however you want, or whatever document feels good for y'all to do, whichever way that your specific community communicates. If you have a document that has 3 different categories, And each item will be, you'll document these 3 different things about the item. What the item actually is. So it's like a stove, a door handle, your window, your floor, like your electrical, your toilet, your fridge. The type, like a gas range if it was a stove, a motion light if it was like a light that was outside of your house, security screen door if you had like 2 doors to your house, etc. Like what type of things they are. So that's the second category. The third category, you're going to do a temperature check. So this is just kind of like a lay assessment, being like, hey, I live in my house. I kind of know what things look like by seeing them every day. So you could say like hot. This is like stuff like my roommates have been, or the people I live with have been saying. They're saying like, hey, can you fix this? This thing needs to be fixed. Those are things that got to be fixed ASAP. Things that have to do with your structural and safety. Let's say like, like maybe like your house is leaning a little bit, or like, there's a big hole in the wall. Things like dry rot. If you live in an older house, like, oh, there's some dry rot on the side, we have to take care of that. That is pretty crucial. Or things like mold, definitely crucial. Those are things that basically are hot. The next category is things that are medium, which is like we can repair in the future, we can kind of fix now, we can wait to fix, we can kind of do like quick fixes, but definitely we have to think about in the near future, we need to get money for this faster than other things that would be the third category, cold. So things that, oh, we just repaired, or things that are in good condition. It's like, oh, this, we have a good floor, we don't have to think about it, but we do have to, down the line, maybe we have to be replacing it. So you're going to go around your house and you're going to have a piece of paper, and which each item, you're going to just say what it is, what type it is, and does it need to be repaired right away or not, by hot, medium, and cold. And that's going to be the first step of the process. The second step of the process, after you do all that, you're going to start trying to figure out how much everything costs. And you're going to try to figure out also how long will it last? So the current estimated cost and life. How you come into that is basically like just research into your appliances and just all the things you have. I know that Elizabeth was saying, being like, oh, we have this one fridge, but this person wants to buy like a $2,000 fridge. This would be that time when you kind of talk about that price, or like, that price is going to be coming into like the details that you need. The thing that you can do is like, if you are getting something fixed, you can ask the repairman, being like, hey, do you know how long it is? Do we have to fix this again? Or you think this is good for a couple of years? Like, let's say they come by to fix your toilet. That's a good way to get stuff and not have to like go through fancy hoops to get the information. Another way, just window shop comparable replacements or upgrades for estimated costs. If you're like, oh, we're going to need a fridge in 5 years, let's see what kind of fridge that is like similar that we can also replace. How much is that right now at this, in 2020, if we look on a website. So that's kind of like, that's the easier stuff, is just like when you think about like appliances or components like light switches, light bulbs, things like that. I think it gets a little bit trickier when you go into like construction materials. Let's say you have to repair like a wall or like some big structural issues in your house. Those are things that are going to be more tricky. And that goes into the next thing, where I suggest that you ask for estimates and walkthroughs from professionals. An easy way to do that is if you have like a handyman that you call, like a handy person, a repair person that you call, you can ask them for general estimates on lives and costs. Alternately, a general contractor could do a basic assessment. Those run about $1,500. And this could also be done by a capital repair specialist. Those are the people that like are trained to do this work, and they usually work with like condos and stuff like that. And they charge like $4,000 to $8,000, just to let you know about that cost. But most of the stuff in your house, unless it's like serious repair, like structural repairs, like I said before, like dry rot or walls, things like that, or like, you know, really big remodels, most of the things in your house, you could just go online and see how much it's going to cost to replace, whether it be an appliance or like I said, light bulbs and things and little small things. So those aren't things that you're going to have to really think about like getting a professional for. But when it does get to like more complex things that are outside of basic repairs, I do suggest that you find ways to have a professional opinion about it. And those are things that we can help you with, like the BACLT, my organization, and Sarah's organization, NCLT, also have contacts for resources to do more professional repair studies. Some additional tips for getting estimated life. You can, if you know when those things were last replaced and repaired, like write that down. You're going to need that information. You can always keep a record. Like things, sometimes records exist in people's minds. It's like probably the oldest tenant, that like the person that's been there the longest, maybe the previous owner who owned your place before it was taken over by the co-op has information about that. Also, you can look in city permits for like when people applied to permits in the past to remodel your property. And those are all ways that you can get estimates if you don't know when the last time something was replaced or repaired. Another tip is just to be sure to keep good upkeep. If your cooperative has like a maintenance crew, like people in your co-op that kind of just, you know, just keep track of all the maintenance and like facilitate that process, but also like make sure that residents and members are also doing some work. Make sure that like there's deep cleans and yearly checkups, and like there is maintenance work such as like tree trimming, changing filters out on things, just general like upkeep in terms of like if you do buy new things and it says in the manual to like, hey, you got to do this every year to upkeep this thing that you bought. Make sure those things are written down somewhere so the other cooperative members can understand that like, yes, we do have to keep these in good condition so we spend less money in the future. Another tip is to be conservative about years left more than to be lax about years left. So err on the side of caution, being like, okay, this might have 10 years, but it's probably more like 7 years left. You know, we can go about 5 more years without this. Like always err like on the side of caution, because you know, you don't know if something it really is going to have that much life left and it could break or just need to be repaired right away. Beware of lemons. I bought a fridge for my house. It broke. We had to buy another one. We learned our lesson. And that's like, you know, it's good to buy things together and have a lot of input if someone knows about it. It's always good because, you know, you can buy, if you buy used things, sometimes they're not going to keep a good life. Mismanagement, upkeep, a lot of the times things aren't repaired and they're like, you know, you acquire a place as a cooperative and there's been mismanagement and upkeep. Just like know that like it's probably not going to have the years that it needs to have, that you estimated to have. Also faulty repairs, that also happens. So make sure to like keep those things in mind and just like, you know, make little notes of that and keep that information flowing to the people in the future who will be in the co-op in years when those repairs do have to come up. So how you get to the final cost after you have gotten all that information, the item, the type, how long it will be to repair, and the years left, and you get the how much it would cost to replace it. You go into this equation, and this is an equation that we have in a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet's already done. Someone did all the work, so all you have to do is put in the information that we've asked you in this workshop to collect. And the way that the equation is come up for how much things will cost and how much you need to budget every month is the final current cost. So let's say I need to buy a refrigerator. I just bought a refrigerator for $2,000. So it said, they told me at the shop that it would last about 20 years. So, and I just bought it this year in 2020, so I would have to replace it in 2040. The final current cost would be the $2,000 that I used to buy this refrigerator now, plus that price times inflation. And we calculate inflation in the spreadsheet at 0.03%, and that's times the number of years. So that number of years would be 2040 when I'd have to replace it, it'd be 20. So 2,000 plus the 2,000 times 0.03 times 20. And so that the equation would be our final cost. That's pretty much what this spreadsheet uses. That's like in the prettiest simplest terms, but this spreadsheet does all that work for you. You're welcome to use this equation in a spreadsheet that works for you if this one is not one that feels like that can speak to you or is accessible to you. But at the same time, we're always around. Like my organization's always around to help with things like that. So basically, the way that the spreadsheet works is you put all that in, and every month it'll tell you the necessary amount of cash needed to have. So when the items are scheduled for repair, and the items will come up, because there'll be like a carpet that needs to be replaced in 1 year, a stove that needs to be replaced in 10 years, a refrigerator that needs to be replaced in 20 years, all that money will be put in and in certain amounts and calculated. So when those repairs come up, the money will be there, and the money will already be put away by the membership. Sarah, do you want to open up that spreadsheet for me?
Yeah, there are a couple questions. Do you want to wait until the end to take those, or?
Let's see.
One is from Sharon about the inflation rate.
Yeah. What is the thinking on the 0.03 inflation rate? That was what I was taught, but if you want to do it at 1.4, that is fine. Was the suggested inflation that I was taught for repair work and appliances, but if that is something that works more for you, then that is totally okay.
Okay. And then Jenny also had a question about maintenance records and warranties and who should keep that, where it should be kept.
It should probably be kept in a file that the co-op can access. Like let's say like if you have if your co-op has like a filing cabinet or something. When I lived in a co-op, it was a filing cabinet at the common desk. We had a common desk and a common computer in the common space, and there was a common filing cabinet, and that's where all the houses, warranties, and records, and all our information, all our paper information that we had to keep was kept. So keep it somewhere central that is accessible to everyone.
And if you do live in a community where maybe you don't have a common space,
yeah.
I do know a lot of people are using Google Drives and scanning everything into there so that they have access to things that way.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the co-ops that I work with, especially now in COVID. We pretty much have to move to cloud-based data storage services like Google Drive or Dropbox to be able to like keep all of our documents somewhere that are accessible to everyone. Thank you for those questions.
Can everyone see the spreadsheet?
I can't see it. I think we have to share a different type of screen because it's on a different.
It's a new share. Yeah. Here we go. How about that?
That's perfect. So as you can see here, this is a sample capital reserve study. And all the equations are already put into this. So all you have to put in is in the yellow. So the yellow is basically where you change everything. This is a reserve study for a 3-unit housing cooperative. So there's 3 units in this housing cooperative. There is 3 little apartments. These 3 little apartments if you want to scroll down, have decided that these are all the components in their apartments that they're going to be collectively responsible for. So there's things like a wood fence, a chain link fence, exterior painting, foundation repair, the roof. So these are the things that are like the outside components. And then above on the top is all the different components that the units all share. So they all have a heater, they all have a water heater, they all have a refrigerator and a stove. It goes by unit, and then the third column C, is going to be the type. So when we asked you like what gas stove, do you have a gas stove or like an electric stove, those are things that it's going to be in there, just so you know what to replace it with. The current estimated cost is how much that was estimated by either like a handyman or like looking online for like if it's like something that you could just buy to replace. The estimated useful life is the next one. So that's kind of like where the hot, cold, and medium come in. If it's going to be hot, it's going to have a less life, and those are the things you kind of have to prioritize to get the number for through whichever means that you can. And the medium and the cold are going to be less prioritized, but you still need to get those numbers because those. And then the last year replaced is the column F, and basically these three numbers are inputted into the rest. Is like these numbers are put into the rest of the spreadsheet. As you can see, G is estimating life left. This as for basically the first, as you see in the spreadsheet in the first line, the water heater was replaced in 2004. It had 15 years life, so that means it had to be replaced in 2019. It has no life left according to the spreadsheet. People have put away $3,500 for this. And every year they put away $233. That's in column I, the annual reserve amount. And then column K is the year to be replaced, 2019. And then the catch-up annual amount is basically, that's how much is needed to be left. As that number is going to be a little off right here because according to the spreadsheet, this had to be replaced last year. So that is the capital reserve and replacement. The next sheet in this, as you can see on the bottom, there's three different sheets. The next one is the capital reserve budget. This basically takes the information that you put in the first sheet and it just gives you a timeline so you have a visual picture of when that money needs to be spent. So as you can see here in the heater, unit 1, this one is a little, the numbers in here are a little different. 2028 is when it needs to be replaced. And here in 2028, down the line in column in line 5, column T, you see in 2028 that it needs to be replaced then. So you'll know when you need to spend that $2,500. So this basically, you don't have to touch this part of the spreadsheet. This spreadsheet just gives you a visual timeline based on all the information and data collected in the first half of it. Sarah, do you want to scroll down a little bit for us? So as you can see, this is a timeline for everything, and scroll down a little bit more. Down here, Danny was asking about the inflation. You can change the inflation right here. So it says 3% right now, but you can change it into the 1.4. And if you go down a little bit more, this will show you how much every person needs to put away every year. So every person has a share of like $750. The next year with inflation at 3% would be $758. The next year with inflation would be $765. Next year is $733, and so on. So this kind of gives you like everyone's monthly or yearly share for how much they need to be putting away every month to be able to put into this pool. And then up here above that column, it's 0.03. You are correct, Sharon. And so here in this column, it basically is showing you how much every year needs to be put away and how much is made. And that's how much your capital reserves are every year in terms of if you're going to be staying on this trajectory to save. As you can see, this is how much is withdrawn every year from the amount of scheduled repairs. And then the revenue is above it. And then the new balance, the carryover amount, is on the bottom. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, 0.03 is the multiplier. That is 3%. So the next sheet on the spreadsheet is we give you like a log. This you can change however you want. This is changeable, and this won't affect anything else in the spreadsheets. The first two spreadsheets interact with each other. This one is just a form that we made in here. There's Rick Lewis at Bay Area Community Land Trust. He made this whole thing up with a community that he was working with. And this is just what we use when we teach in our land trust on how to teach people how to do these types of things. So when this was last used, it was a sample for like a multi-unit building, but this can all be changed to however you need to look to be able to actually collect that data. So as you can see here, it's the item, the type, last year replaced, estimated useful life, current estimated cost, and then just any kind of notes. So any kind of little information that people in the future would need to know for them to make informed decisions on repairs and maintenance. Does anyone have any questions? Do you want to bring it to the next slide, Sarah? Thank you.
Sorry, I just realized I'm on mute. Actually, before we move forward, because I know, Elizabeth, you mentioned that Addison is actually using these spreadsheets right now. And do you have anything to say about how that's been for you all? What's been helpful? What's been challenging?
Am I muted or?
No, you're on.
I'm on. Okay, maybe I should have my video on too then. Oh, wait, come on, there we go. So, yes, I think it has been a very good guide for us to have this. And it's, you know, I think that it's daunting in the fact that when we look at it and see that we are not we're not putting enough money into the replacement budget, but according to the spreadsheet. But then also the other thing that happens is that certain things that are estimated to break, they don't break when we are estimating them to break. So, I mean, I have one unit that I've been for like several years thinking that hot water heater is going to die any day. But it hasn't. It's lasted another 5 years. So, you know, one has to look at this as just a suggestion, and then also be realistic about and look at, you know, what it is we need to replace, instead of just saying, well, you know, I mean, we just realized this year that our treasurer, who now is handling this most of the time, or she is, and I'm the maintenance coordinator, came up and said, well, there's 21 items that needs to be addressed this year. Well, that's what the spreadsheet says, but through a close observation and like one major thing is our sewer line on one of the buildings. And because it was estimated that it needed to be replaced this year. And I had it checked out by a good plumber. And he said, no, it's fine. I don't see any reasons for it to be replaced this year. So that's something that we're looking at all the time. But when that replacement comes, that's a big ticket item.
How does your co-op reconcile for that? I think for me, the way I see it too is just like, okay, this is a hot, like there are definitely every year when we have like all this stuff to look at, we just reassess it again and temperature check it. But how does your cooperative like reconcile that being like, okay, well, we don't have to replace the sewer this year. So do you all just keep the money then in the budget, or do you prioritize other more high priority repairs?
Because I don't do that part of it. I'm the one who hires the contractors and things like that and get permits. So I think it just stays there. I mean, it just stays in here, right? Like then we know that that column that says year to replace, it might say 0 and it might say 0 for several years. But we also know that the money has been put allocated, and when it comes up, we can deal with it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Elizabeth.
I'm the treasurer at Addison Court, and I would add that so what actually happens if it doesn't get repaired, when the money is just kept in reserve, like that's what happened. But actually, we haven't until recently really been focusing on our reserves. We've just been having a certain budget every year for repairs and staying within that budget more or less. And what the capital reserve study has let us know is that according to the predictions of the capital reserve study, in about 2 years from now, the number of repairs that we expect to have will greatly exceed our budget and our reserves. So that gives us a couple of years to think about that. Got a little heads up on that. And things, you can't really predict when things will break, so you don't know for sure. But according to our estimates, it looks like something's coming in a couple of years. So.
Yeah, definitely. And it's more like a warning. This is more like a warning system, or like just kind of like a pop-up on your phone, like a little pop-up text, than it is actually like we have to replace things. It's just more like this is just a way to communicate visibility around the components of your house.
Yeah, and that we might want to start saving up for the thing that's coming in a couple of years. Yeah.
Emergency preparedness.
Yeah, and the temperature check and, looking again, when you bring out people to give you estimates on estimated life that may be left in something that, right now per the spreadsheet is up right now, it's helpful when you are looking at, you're behind on your reserves. I was just working with a community that, per the study, that painting was supposed to happen on both buildings. It's 2 buildings that are part of the homeowners association. And that's true on the front building, but not on the back building. And they had somebody come out and, give an assessment for how much it would cost to paint the front building and then look at the back building. They're like, look, your paint job is great on this. Sun hasn't really affected it that much. You've got another 5 years left, which was helpful for them because they are behind in what they need to save in their reserves for things. And so they just changed it. In the study itself, giving another 5 years so that they could look at, okay, how much money, since we're behind, do we need to raise? And so that's one way that they, just use the spreadsheet and then change things in order to build up what they need in the future and not feel completely overwhelmed. Is there any other questions or discussion folks want to have on the capital reserve study or replacement budget before we move on? And thank you, Elizabeth and Sharon, for sharing your experience in using this tool. It's really, really helpful. And I'm glad that it's been a helpful tool for you guys as you think through collectively what you need to do for your space and your homes. Okay, so just wanted to tie all of this back, thinking of a capital reserve study and capital replacement budget, as savings and a long-term thing that you need to monitor for what needs to happen in, the immediate and the further on future. And then you have your annual operating budget, which, if you think of your individual personal finances, thinking of this as your checking account, which is often what co-ops and condos actually use for their annual operating budget. So, you're thinking about the income that you have, the money that's coming in, whether through carrying charges or homeowner association dues, small amount of interest that may be coming in from your bank. And then other folks actually might have loans that they've taken out to deal with different things. That could also be income. And then your typical expenses, your typical annual expenses that you put into that annual operating budget. Just popcorn around. What are some typical annual expenses that you all expect that's not necessarily tied to long-term replacements? All right, I'll throw out some. Insurance is one.
Ginny said cleaning the gutters, which is definitely.
Yep. That could be a regular occurrence on an annual basis. Yep.
Well, there are those other, there are things like, fire extinguishers, but I think we already have that, Are you talking about annual expenses that we don't necessarily record, or?
No, it'd be annual expenses in your budget. So let me go ahead and pull up this example budget here. And new share so that you can actually see it. Okay, can folks see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have, this is an HOA budget, so it's a little bit different, but dues could also be carrying charges. So what's coming in monthly and annually. And then you have your typical annual expenses. So if you're, any accounting services that you may be using, maybe it's something that's actually being done by another member, so you wouldn't have that expense. Gardener, insurance, any license and fees that you need to pay with the state or with the city. Maybe some, just estimates on maintenance and repairs. It's not connected to long-term stuff, but just putting a little bit in the budget, thinking about things that may be unexpected. And then utilities. So PG&E here is gas and electric, and then water and sewer. So so looking at income and then expenses, you're getting your net income. So what is left over after you have paid all that? And so, these are just estimates that you make at the beginning of each year. And then you constantly want to check, where are you actually as you go throughout the year? We suggest that people do this on a quarterly basis. And then at the end of their annual fiscal year, look at the actuals compared to the estimates, so that when you're preparing your budget for the following year, your annual operating budget, you might need to change some of these assumptions based on, are utilities going up? Or maybe they're going down because people have figured out how to use their water differently. Or you've added in more appliances that are more, efficient. And then, in your annual budget, you always want to have a goal that's tied to your capital reserve budget as far as how much you're going to be moving over to your replacement reserve. And that's the connection between your annual budget and your operating, your annual operating budget and the capital reserve budget. You have your net income. Maybe there's some of that you want to keep within your checking account, but then there's that goal amount based on what what your needs are for savings that you want to transfer over to your replacement reserve. And let me go back to So again, you're going to be thinking, do you have a net, enough net income to meet those annual savings goals? You may not. And so if you don't have enough, how can you raise that income? Or how can you how can you think about different ways to maybe bring down costs that may exist within your capital reserve budget, or even may exist within your annual budget in order to meet that? I don't know if there's anything that folks want to share as far as the interplay between their annual budget process and then thinking about long-term savings for capital replacements. Or any questions that folks have?
I have a question, I think.
Yes.
I've noticed so since like all of our savings go into this capital reserve fund that we need, like in our situation, we need it for all of this deferred maintenance. Like, what is the room for flexibility with the budget? Because it's hard to know, like, if we're if everything is supposed to go into the savings account, what we have for like additional, I don't know, like expenses in the house.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And we typically are suggesting to folks that they keep about 5 months of income in their checking account so that they can, just have it there for anything that may come up that's unexpected. And, if you're not able to do that at that time, maybe a little bit less, but have a goal for 3 to 5 months of carrying dues that you keep within your checking account, that you don't move over to your replacement reserve, your savings account for unexpected things that do come up.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay. So we want to go back to some of the things that were brought up earlier, and that probably you've been thinking as we've gone through these different tools and talked about how they work, and then how they work in real life. Just wanted to have an open discussion about challenges that come up when talking about money and budgets and maintenance. And if there's anything that you want to share based on what we've just been presenting here throughout this workshop, anything that's come up for you as you think about using these tools.
I have a question.
Yes.
Like, what about like some of this money that we are having in a savings account and it's getting minimal amount of interest? What about having some of that money in some secure investment like a CD or even just a money market account, which is not that much, but it's a little bit more than just a savings account? What are your thoughts around that? Of having the money working for you, basically, instead of just having it in a savings account and getting less than 1% interest on it.
This is a good question, and I have to be honest, it's not something that I've thought through. I don't know if Ari has. As long as there's enough that's accessible for you all to take out when you need to use it, I think that it's something that could be used, that could actually be helpful. You just want to think through the parameters around that. So, looking at your capital reserve budget and thinking, okay, these are the hot items that are going to need to be repaired this year. Can we easily get access to that money? And so how much needs to be in the savings account? How easily can we move it over from a CD into use for us? And yeah, how much can we leave in the CD? Those would be the major things that I would think about, is just having easy access to money when you need it. Ari, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this topic.
I don't. My work is more like resource building, like community grassroots fundraising. That's where most of my strengths and background is in. So I'm more equipped to handle questions in that regard, not so much like financials within like stocks and CDs and things like that. Bruja had a question. How frequently should a group meet to review budget, stay on top of these questions, monthly, quarterly? In a lot of co-ops, which I support at BACLT, I think a lot of them do meet monthly. Jocelyn can probably speak to that too, being in a co-op on the finance committee. Because people usually meet monthly to like just check up on like where our finances are, if any expenses come up that month. It's just being able to do the process together. And it doesn't even need to be that long, because sometimes there's some months where you don't really have a lot going on. It's just a way to be transparent and check in about stuff. And if you have like new ideas or if something's not working, it's a good space to meet intentionally to like workshop through things and to find more creative ways to like use the resources that you have to to get the needs met that you have, that your cooperative has. Let's say, like there's more than, there's, especially if you're like intentional communities and you like are like have like nonprofit or adjacent nonprofit status, it's easier for you to like get things like grants, or if you have like a certain vision or like a certain mission statement in your community, there's ways in which in your intentional community or cooperative, there's ways in which you can have other ways of resource like grants or just community grassroots mutual aid and things like that to be able to get your needs met outside of like capital money specific things. And those are just ways like I want to just invite everyone to be like creative and in thinking about that as well, because money can be such a daunting thing, but like Bruje said, we living in abundance, and when you think about that, it kind of has to go outside of the paradigm of thinking about, just people paying us assessments every month to be able to pay for these things. And there's ways that you can be, you can be creative outside of that as well, especially when people don't always have that amount of money to give. They have other people also have like other ways to contribute.
Bruje had another question. Activities or prompts to help collectives talk about money in radical ways and healing.
Ooh, good question. I don't have that on hand like right here to show you, but feel free to contact me outside of the workshop, and maybe there's a way that everyone who signed up for this workshop, we could just give materials to afterwards, and I can definitely look through my materials. I'm pretty sure I do have a little bit of those, so would love to share those with y'all at post meeting.
Yeah. And just so folks know, we're just kind of dipping our toes at the end of this into the discussion around decision making. We know that it's actually a big one because it has to do with your process, how you make decisions, planning that you already have in place, maybe procedures and community agreements and how to build those. So this is an entirely separate workshop, actually, that we would like to do in the future. And so just keep that in mind, that right now we're just kind of dipping our toes in, because we wanted to bring up the discussion on challenges around this topic, but there's more to discuss after this workshop, for sure.
I think some challenges that we have in our co-op is like managing expectations around money, in that we have people from many different financial backgrounds, and just like, people who have like more, there's like some people who kind of like expect money to always be present and are able to use it to their advantage more, and then there's people who aren't used to having money and then are therefore like less able to access or less willing to access the funds that we have to support their units, if that makes sense. I'm not like expecting an answer or anything. It's just like a challenge that we've had in our co-op is like I don't know, some folks like being able to use the systems that we have in place more abundantly because they're used to just like, they're more comfortable using money, and other folks who aren't as comfortable using money, like not getting the repairs and care that they need with our budget. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. And is this around just people being able to bring up what their needs are?
Yeah, or like maybe not even recognizing that the co-op can help them. Or, you know, there's various reasons too. Like sometimes it could be like stubbornness or like just wanting to do it themselves. I don't know, things like that.
Yeah. You know, I just out of a recent experience that I had working with an HOA, you know, again, same what you're talking about, same circumstance of people having different backgrounds around money and access to it. And what has really helped them to be able to talk collectively about it and be honest where they're coming from is having a space during every meeting where they talk about these things. And talk about things with no judgment. And so, yeah, just having a space where people can bring up, these are my needs, these are my fears around having this discussion. And it's really helped to bring down the barriers and people being able to talk collectively about money and things that need to happen around that. And not having, not one person said, you know, I don't feel ashamed about this as much anymore because there's a dedicated space that's safe for us to come and discuss this stuff. And it's not something that's, you know, shoved under the rug anymore. So that's one thing that I found that has been helpful for that particular community.
How was that introduced, that dialogue?
Yeah, so it was introduced after they went through and finally completed their capital reserve budget. And they were like, oh my gosh, we're so behind. And so that was like, oh gosh, how are we going to catch up? And so just bringing up, let's have a space to talk about, you know, our feelings around being behind, and then a regular space to talk about how can we get there, and understanding that we're coming from different places with our experience with money and different things that we can bring to the table. So it actually came out of a place of crisis, and everybody kind of feeling that crisis. And then I was there to be kind of a facilitator for folks that, you know, I wasn't feeling the same kind of crisis because I don't live there, but I could help hold space for people that were coming from different places and helping to facilitate that conversation. So that's how that had happened in that particular community. I don't know if Ari has anything to share from experiences with other places.
Yeah, like a clearing circle. Is that what y'all did, Sarah?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are really cool. It's basically like, to add on to what Sarah said, I've used those before in times of like where people weren't value aligned. You basically just open up a space for people to talk when they have the time to meet, either at a formal meeting setting or a different time. Sometimes it's better to do it at a different time outside of a formal meeting, like, you know, your monthly meetings, because sometimes these things can be really exhausting, and you just want people to be able to like not have to do that and then have to do the regular meeting things. But it's really good to have, like, there's always ground rules. It's just like Sarah said, no judgment. People get to speak from I statements and to talk about how they directly feel and are impacted, and just making those parameters and creating a container to be able to have people to like just talk about things. A lot of cooperative intentional communities, a lot of indigenous communities use this practice, and some even use it daily. I know some indigenous communities who use this daily, like as they're going to sleep every night. It's just they have like a circle to just talk about, people who share space together, to talk about like anything happens. It's just a way to be able to just see where people are coming from and to be able to move closer together in terms of values and needs, and to be able to support each other in wherever people are at that time. But yes, creating a container and creating guidelines for that is really important, and it's a really good practice in terms of like if you are having to share things together like resources.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that people would want to share about how they've met the challenge around talking about money or other challenges that have come up for them in talking about money?
I would like to hear if anyone has had problems that needed solving by some other method than being ever more kind and sensitive with every new level of conflict or rebellion, or, you know, I feel like we have a fair number of people on various levels of functioning and various levels of intentionality, and we actually need to be able to say, you have to pay your rent. And in fact, we may have to raise your rent quite a bit because of this shortfall, you know, in an intimate family setting or in a very small co-op, like, you know, you can say, okay, we all just need to sit down and figure out how much we love each other and that will solve it. But actually, sometimes you need to have a more firm conversation, you know, both because of the various levels of functioning of people that we have and the fact that we're at a size where it's easy to diffuse responsibility, you know, like, so I'm kind of wondering if anyone has experience being able to assert a more firm line and solve things that are not solved by just being softer and softer and softer.
So I'll speak from the recent experience I had with this HOA that finally completed their capital reserve budget. With everybody doing that together and realizing the shortfall and what that would mean for everybody long term, it actually opened up discussions around, some folks who hadn't been paying for a long time, and they were part of the conversation as well. And then, you know, being honest about where their finances were. And then also because they had been part of, you know, looking at the capital reserve budget, helping to put it together, and just feeling a sense of responsibility around that. Also saying, okay, this is what I can contribute at this moment, where they hadn't been contributing anything. And then I want to work together with the homeowners association for how I could catch up in the future. But that conversation would have never happened if they hadn't been part of helping to build the capital reserve budget and the study, and analyzing it together and just feeling a sense of shared responsibility around, this is our place, it's falling apart. I have to be a part of it, both from my personal labor, but then also from what I can give financially. So that's kind of like a combination of things, but it was just doing that together that helped to make that happen. And you know, the condo had in the past just sent letters to them saying, this is what you owe, we want you to pay it now, otherwise we're going to assess late fees, which had never come to anything until they were part of this corporate process and realized, like, oh gosh, this affects me as well. Our place is going to fall apart, and I need to contribute. So that's one example.
At a co-op that I lived at, we had people that couldn't pay, and we just had them do signing contracts to pay back if they fell into a amount of money that was like a substantial amount that would mess with our capital reserve budget. We just would put people into payment plans and have them sign that payment plan. But yes, to echo what Sarah said, having people to understand what that payment is, because a lot of the times I've noticed in cooperatives that I've lived at, when people do fall behind, they just don't understand what the actual ecosystem of the co-op is in terms of like where all this money goes and how it affects other people.
Or they don't care, or they're waiting for someone to say, well, how is this contract going to be enforced? Like, you know, I'm the question I'm asking is, not everyone responds well to being given ever higher levels of understanding and softness. Like, some people interpret that as, oh good, I don't have to deal with this then. Like, you know.
Yeah, but that's when we come into consequence in terms of agreements and values, you know? And that's more that goes into more of that and conflict and stuff like that and things around that. If someone, and this is not, I don't say this in words of being soft. I'm just saying, like, you know, taking the whole picture to understand like people's potential. Does that make sense in terms of like transformation and potential? But yeah, like that goes more into consequence. Well, what are your collective consequences of your co-op when people don't contribute? Do you have those in place? And I think that's really important for understanding when people do not contribute, is more about like a collective consequence in terms of like understanding where people's values are, and maybe when they don't align when they don't align with the collective values of like understanding that some finances are shared and pooled.
If I could also offer that, I found for us that transparency helps. And a lot of people don't think it necessarily does. I feel like transparency almost always is helps, because I know that we had some issues early on with a particular resident who did not want, how do I put this? She was very it wasn't that she wasn't paying, but she was very resistant and very openly negative about the idea that the membership fee would increase. And when I say an increase, I mean like $25 a month, or between $25 to $50 a month the following year. And it turned into this thing of, well, that's just what landlords do, and they always raise your rent and they don't need to, and da 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 da. And the way I kind of came at that was by just being very transparent about our finances. And the main thing is, our lease has increased on this space, and because we're paying the internet and the utilities and the water, and we set that rate at what we guessed, at our best guesstimation of what the power would be for each unit per month, that wasn't necessarily on the money. So we have to make that up somewhere. And so I found that this was a person who, how do I put it? This was a person who wanted to be combative and wanted to be negative about the thing, but my being as transparent as I could be took her power away, her power to be negative in that situation. It didn't stop her from being negative by any means. She just found different ways to do so, but she could no longer kind of use that as fodder, because it was about the collective need to, we're all sharing each other's expenses in this situation.
I see in the chat, Sharon, were you responding to Jenny? How can you be part of the co-op and not understand how it works? And yeah, Sharon shared that people have highly varying levels of capacity, understanding, priorities, and interest. As far as who acts as the authority, I mean, it's the collective group, and then however your decision-making process is set out. I know that most people work on consensus. Again, decision-making is a whole other workshop, but Sharon's shaking her head. I do want to share the condo that I worked with that has finally gotten to a better place. Because there was such a loggerhead at making decisions and a lot of personal strife, they did on certain decisions decide to move forward with a straight 3/4 vote in order to be able to get some things done. which I know is not usually what people would want to do within collective decision making, but it helped them to kind of break through the logjam, to make some decisions that others just dug their heels in on, and were blocking everything, and there was no way to get stuff unblocked. And so that helped to move things forward. And then because the HOA is connected with the land trust, and the land trust is a member of the HOA, and their documents also bringing us in, initially as an impartial member to help facilitate discussions, but then also to be a part of that vote when there was no other way to move forward. Sharon, I saw that you unmuted yourself.
Oh, I think consensus is a nightmare, actually. I mean, and you're setting a lot of requirements on how functional people have to be a member of the group when you set that up, but that's neither here nor there on a discussion about budget. I just wanted to hear if people had experiences, and I think I've heard some stories, so we should probably move on.
Okay. Well, this is what we had to share for today on different tools for budgeting and maintenance, and then, touching together on a discussion around making those decisions together, which again, we're just dipping our toes in the water on this. I don't know if there's any other questions that folks have, experiences that they want to share. Then I want to go ahead, really grateful that you all were here with us today. Ari and I are available for questions that come up afterwards. And then we'll also be sending you the slides from today, the tools, the spreadsheets that we put together. And then Ari mentioned some stuff around, Ari, I can't remember what you said that you were going to share.
It was, Ruhe had asked for resources around dealing with money and like a lived experience around capital. So I have some of those that I can share with our outgoing email.
Great.
I just wanted to add a comment, if I may, or it's not really a question, but a comment. I really appreciate this, and I had the revelation while doing this that it makes it so much easier to do these things and have these conversations from the beginning. And I'm looking at like a lot of our current processes and wishing, wow, I wish we thought about these things when we first started, and kind of set a tone, set a baseline, because was it Sharon who mentioned that people's capacities for wanting to work collaboratively and collectively differ. And I guess for us, one of the things that we've always done is as people are coming in, we kind of set a tone. And the finance tone is one to definitely, it's one I guess we've kind of avoided looking at, but it's one to definitely kind of involve from the start. And so thank you for this.
Thank you so much, Danny.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And we'll also be sending out a survey. So any feedback that you have for us on this particular workshop, things that you enjoyed, things that you think that should be added, that we can improve on. We're always looking for new ways to make information more accessible. And yeah, just more interactive for folks, especially in this Zoom space as well. Okay, thank you so much. And if anyone wants, I'm sorry. And before folks go, if anyone wants to be in touch with each other, you can feel free to drop your information in the chat. Usually when I send out information, I put everybody in the BCC because there were more people that signed up for this workshop than actually were able to show up today. So don't want to be passing out your information to folks that you don't know. But if people want to be in touch with each other, feel free to put that information in the chat before you go. All right, thank you everyone so much. Hope you enjoy your Saturday, and just want to really give gratitude for the sharing that was held today, both on challenges and things that have worked, and really thank Ari for bringing her experience and expertise as well.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for coming. Yeah, and thanks for all these conversations. This is really, it's just really cool that we have these spaces to get together and to just share knowledge, but also like work through challenges together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
Do you need to check in with me, or can I, if so, can I use the restroom?
oh yeah, totally. Go use.
Thank you.